The kitchen was quiet except for the soft hum of the dishwasher when Emma stormed in, waving an envelope like a victory flag. Her eyes gleamed with a cruel satisfaction I'd never seen in my 17-year-old daughter before. "Look what I got," she said, her voice dripping with contempt. She slapped the envelope onto the counter between us. "DNA results. Want to explain why Dad isn't showing up as my biological father?" My hands stilled over the sink where I'd been washing dishes. I carefully dried them on a kitchen towel, buying myself precious seconds to steady my racing heart. I'd known this day might come, but I hadn't expected it like this. I hadn't expected the look of smug triumph on my daughter's face. "How long have you been lying to us?" Emma demanded, crossing her arms. "Does Dad even know? Or have you been playing him for a fool all these years too?" I took a deep breath, studying her face, the face that looked so much like mine at her age, yet held none of the warmth or understanding I desperately needed from her right now. "Sit down, Emma," I said quietly. "This isn't a conversation we should have standing up." She scoffed, but dropped into one of the kitchen chairs, still radiating righteous anger. "Fine. Explain how you've been living a lie for the past 17 years. This should be good." My name is Sarah Mitchell, and my daughter had just unknowingly opened a door to the past I'd spent nearly 2 decades trying to keep firmly shut. Not because I was ashamed, but because some truths are too heavy for children to bear. Some stories need to wait until the right moment, and this wasn't it. But Emma had forced my hand. I sat down across from her, folding my hands on the table. "First, I need you to understand something. Everything I've done, every choice I've made, has been to protect you and give you the best life possible." Emma rolled her eyes. "Save the mom speech. I want the truth." "The truth," I said carefully, "is complicated. And before we go any further, I need to know exactly what you're hoping to accomplish here. Are you looking for answers, or are you just trying to hurt me?" She faltered for a moment, her confidence wavering. "I deserve to know who my real father is," she said finally, but her voice had lost some of its edge. I nodded slowly. "Yes, you do, but not like this. Not as a weapon you can use to try to tear this family apart." "Family?" She laughed bitterly. "What family? It's all built on lies." "No," I said firmly. "It's built on love. Your father, the man who raised you, who has loved you every single day of your life, knows you're not biologically his. He's always known." Emma's eyes widened, her carefully constructed narrative beginning to crack. "What? David and I met when I was already pregnant with you," I explained, watching her face carefully. "I was 22, scared, and alone. He didn't have to stay. He didn't have to love us, but he chose to every single day." "But why didn't you tell me?" Emma's voice trembled. I reached across the table, grateful when she didn't pull away from my touch. "Because some stories need time. Because you needed to be old enough to understand that family isn't just about DNA. It's about choice. It's about love." "Then who is my biological father?" she asked, her voice smaller now. I closed my eyes briefly, memories washing over me. "His name was Michael. And that story is the part I've been trying to protect you from." "I want to know," Emma insisted, but the smugness was gone, replaced by something more vulnerable. "I need to know." I took another deep breath, steeling myself for the conversation I'd hoped to have years from now when she was older, when she could better understand the complexities of love and loss and the choices we make when we're young. "I met Michael when I was in college," I began, my voice steady despite the ache in my chest. "He was charming, ambitious, and I thought I was in love. We dated for nearly a year before I got pregnant." Emma leaned forward, hanging on every word. "What happened when I told him about the pregnancy?" I paused, choosing my words carefully. "He made it clear he wasn't ready for that responsibility. He had plans. Law school, a career, a future that didn't include a baby. He told me to take care of it, and when I refused, he disappeared. Just like that." "Just like that?" Emma whispered. I nodded. "Just like that. I tried to contact him a few times, but he blocked my number, changed his email. His parents, your biological grandparents, they told me to stay away and offered me money to keep quiet about the whole thing. Did you take it? Emma asked, her eyes wide. No, I said firmly. I didn't want their money. I wanted to give you a life filled with love, not secrets and shame. I dropped out of college, moved back home with my parents, and started working 2 jobs to prepare for your arrival. I watched as Emma processed this information, her earlier bravado completely gone. But then, how did you meet Dad? I mean, David? A small smile crossed my face at the memory. I was working at a coffee shop, 7 months pregnant and exhausted. David was a regular customer, always kind, always left a good tip. One day, I was so tired I nearly fainted while taking his order. He helped me sit down, brought me water, and stayed with me until my shift ended. And he didn't care that you were pregnant with someone else's baby. He said it was like getting 2 miracles for the price of 1, I replied, feeling tears prick at my eyes. He started coming by more often, always checking on me, bringing me healthy snacks because he'd read somewhere that pregnant women needed extra nutrients. Emma's lip trembled. He really chose us? He did, I confirmed. We got married when you were 6 months old. He insisted on legally adopting you, said he wanted the world to know you were his daughter in every way that mattered. That's why his name is on your birth certificate, because he chose to be your father. The kitchen fell silent as Emma absorbed this information. I could see the conflict on her face, the way her earlier certainty had crumbled in the face of a truth far more complex than she'd imagined. I'm sorry, she finally whispered, tears spilling down her cheeks. I thought I was exposing some terrible secret. I wanted to hurt you because I've been so angry lately, and I didn't even know why. I moved around the table to pull her into my arms, feeling her body shake with sobs. You're 17, sweetheart. Being angry is part of growing up. But next time, talk to me. Ask me. Don't try to weaponize our history. She nodded against my shoulder. Does Dad... is he going to be mad about the DNA test? No, I said softly, stroking her hair. He's always known this day would come eventually. We both did. We just hoped you'd come to us first, that we could tell you the story together when you were ready to hear it. I want to hear it, Emma said, pulling back to wipe her eyes. All of it, and I want Dad here too. I smiled, reaching for my phone. I'll call him. But Emma looked up at me. Remember this feeling. Remember how different the truth was from what you imagined. Sometimes the stories we tell ourselves about other people's choices, they're not nearly as simple as we think. As I dialed David's number, I watched Emma sink back into her chair, the DNA results forgotten on the counter. She looked younger suddenly, more vulnerable, like the little girl who used to crawl into our bed during thunderstorms. David answered on the second ring. Hey, love, everything okay? Emma took a DNA test, I said simply. It's time for that conversation we've been preparing for. There was a pause, then his warm, steady voice came through the line. I'll be home in 20 minutes. We'll do this together, like we've done everything else. I hung up and looked at Emma, who was watching me with red-rimmed eyes. He's on his way, I told her. Are you ready to hear the whole story? She nodded, and I could see the change in her, the way her earlier defiance had transformed into something softer, more open. Yeah, she said quietly. I think I am. David arrived exactly 20 minutes later, his footsteps echoing through the house as he entered. I watched Emma tense slightly at the sound. Her earlier confidence completely dissolved when he appeared in the kitchen doorway, still in his work clothes. His eyes immediately found Emma. Hey, sweetheart, he said softly, setting his briefcase down. Your mom filled me in. Emma's lip trembled. Dad, But before she could finish, David crossed the room and pulled her into a tight hug. It's okay, he murmured into her hair. We've been waiting for this day. I just wish you felt you could come to us first. I watched them embrace, my heart swelling with love for this man who had chosen us, who had never once made Emma feel like she was anything less than his whole world. When they finally pulled apart, David kept one arm around Emma's shoulders as he sat down beside her. "Tomo," he said, looking between us. "Where should we start?" "Mom told me about meeting you," Emma said quietly. "About how you chose us." David smiled, his eyes meeting mine across the table. "Best decision I ever made. But there's more to the story, isn't there, Sarah?" I nodded, knowing we had to tell her everything now. No more protecting her from the harder truths. Yes, Emma needs to know about what happened after. About Michael's attempts to come back. Emma's head snapped up. "What? He tried to come back?" I took a deep breath, feeling David's steady presence giving me strength. "When you were 5 years old, Michael showed up at our door. He'd seen a photo of you at his parents' house. They've been keeping tabs on us through mutual friends, though I didn't know it at the time." "What did he want?" Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "He said he made a mistake," I continued, the memory still sharp after all these years. "He finished law school, started a successful career, got married, but something was missing. He said he couldn't stop thinking about the daughter he'd abandoned." David's jaw tightened slightly, but his voice remained calm. "I wonder what you told him, Sarah." I reached across the table to take Emma's hand. "I told him he'd lost the right to be your father the day he walked away. That being a parent isn't something you can decide to do only when it's convenient. Your dad, David, he'd been there for every moment. Every skinned knee, every nightmare, every triumph. He was your father in every way that mattered." "Did Michael fight you on it?" Emma asked. "He threatened to take us to court," David answered, his voice steady. "He said he had resources now, could prove he was the biological father and demand partial custody." Emma's eyes widened. "What did you do?" "We fought back," I said simply. "We had years of documented abandonment, proof that he rejected any responsibility when I was pregnant. Plus, David had legally adopted you. The law was on our side. But more importantly," David added, squeezing Emma's shoulder, "you were old enough to be affected by any custody battle. We weren't going to put you through that trauma just because Michael suddenly decided he was ready to play dad." "He backed off eventually," I continued. "I think he realized that pursuing it would only hurt everyone involved, especially you. But he did make one request." "What was it?" Emma asked. "He asked that when you were old enough to understand, we tell you the truth. Tell you that he regretted his choices, that he'd grown up and realized what he'd thrown away." I paused, studying my daughter's face. "We agreed, but on our terms, when we felt you were ready." Emma was quiet for a moment, processing everything. "Do you know where he is now?" David and I exchanged a look. "Yes," I said carefully. "He's still in the area, actually. He has his own law firm downtown and 2 other children with his wife." "My half-siblings," Emma whispered, testing the words. "Biologically, yes," David said gently. "But Emma, you need to understand something. Just because you share DNA with someone doesn't mean they have a right to be in your life. That's your choice to make when and if you're ready." Emma looked up at him, tears in her eyes. "But you'll always be my real dad, right? No matter what." David pulled her close again, his own eyes glistening. "Always, sweetheart. Nothing could ever change that." I watched them together, remembering all the moments that had led us here. The day David had first held Emma, his eyes full of wonder. Her first steps taken toward him with complete trust. The father-daughter dances, the bedtime stories, the countless small moments that had built their unshakable bond. "I feel so stupid," Emma said finally, wiping her eyes. "I thought I was going to expose this huge scandal, but instead you learned that family is more complicated and beautiful than just biology," I finished for her. "That love is a choice we make every day." "The DNA test," David added. "It doesn't change who we are. It doesn't erase our history or diminish our love for you. If anything, it just confirms what I've always known, that choosing to be your father was the greatest gift of my life." Emma reached for the envelope still sitting on the counter, picking it up with trembling fingers. "Can we throw this away? I don't need it anymore." I smiled, feeling tears prick at my eyes. Of course. We watched as she tore the envelope in half, then quarters, letting the pieces fall into the trash. As she did, I saw something shift in her expression, a kind of peace settling over her features. "Mom," she said softly. "Dad, I'm sorry for trying to hurt you, for not trusting you enough to just ask." "We understand," I assured her. "Growing up means questioning things, trying to figure out who you are. But next time you have questions about your past, come to us first. We've never wanted to hide anything from you. We just wanted to protect you until you were ready for the whole truth." David nodded in agreement. "And now that everything's out in the open, we can talk about what you want to do next. If you have questions about Michael, about your biological heritage, we'll help you find those answers when you're ready." Emma shook her head. "I don't think I want to know right now. Maybe someday." But she looked between us, her expression softening. "Right now, I just want to be here with my real family." The three of us sat there in the kitchen as the evening light filtered through the windows, our family stronger for having weathered the storm together. Emma's DNA test, meant to be a weapon, had instead become a bridge to understanding, a reminder that the bonds that matter most aren't the ones we're born with, but the ones we choose to nurture and protect. Later that night, after Emma had gone to bed, David and I sat on the back porch, his arm around my shoulders as we looked up at the stars. "You okay?" he asked softly. I nodded, leaning into his warmth. "Better than okay, I think. I think this needed to happen. Maybe not exactly the way it did, but Emma needed to know the truth. She's stronger than we give her credit for," David mused. "Just like her mother." I turned to look at him, this man who had stepped into our lives and chosen to make us his family. "Thank you," I whispered, "for everything, for loving us both so completely." He smiled, pulling me closer. "Thank you for letting me, for trusting me with your heart and with Emma's." Inside, we could hear Emma moving around in her room, probably getting ready for bed. The sound was so familiar, so precious. A reminder of all the ordinary moments that made up our extraordinary love story. "Do you think she'll want to meet him someday?" I asked quietly. "Michael?" David was quiet for a moment, considering. "Maybe. And if she does, we'll support her. But I think today showed her something important. That the truth isn't always what we expect it to be. And sometimes the family we choose is stronger than the family we're born into." I nodded, feeling a deep sense of peace settle over me. The secret I carried for so long wasn't a secret anymore, and somehow that made everything clear. Our family wasn't perfect, but it was real. It was built on choice, on love, on the daily decision to be there for each other. Emma's DNA test, meant to break us apart, had only brought us closer together. It had shown her and reminded us that family isn't just about blood. It's about the people who stay, who choose to love us through every storm, who build a life with us one moment at a time. As David and I sat there under the stars, I thought about all the paths that had led us here, every choice, every struggle, every moment of doubt and faith. And I knew with absolute certainty that we had created something beautiful, a family bound not by DNA, but by something far stronger, the power of unconditional love.